We look forward to seeing what you do with your second chance.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And now you said you could get Botox now that you're out.
I can.
Okay. Something you can't do in prison.
You can't.
Thank you.
Disgraced former Congressman George Santos is back, baby, and ready for Botox. This is the Dollemore Daily. I'm Garrison Hayes, guest hosting for Jesse while he's on vacation. And over the weekend, George Santos, who is easily one of the most notorious scammers and liars to reach elected office, to reach the halls of Congress ever, and that's saying a lot. That's saying something. He went on a welcome home press tour to thank Donald Trump for commuting his sentence after serving only about 84 days of a 7-year prison term for wire fraud and identity theft. Do you remember when George Santos said, "I'm Jewish"? And then when people kind of like dug into it, he went back and said, "Oh, no. I didn't say I was Jewish. I said I was Jew-ish." That's crazy. Fox News clip right here.
Thank you so much for joining us on the couch. So let's just, first of all, congratulations on getting out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you to President Trump for clemency and for having such an amazing will for second chances. I feel like it's justice served in the sense of I've made some poor choices in my life, but
to say the least, huh? I've made some poor Yeah, that's true. Actually, we'll talk a little bit about some of the crimes he's accused, the crimes he pled guilty to committing. We'll talk about that in a bit. Let's keep watching.
Nothing would warrant a insane, arbitrary sentence, but on top of that, a sentence that no one else would have gotten.
Now, I want to just pause here because listen to the kind of like rhetorical things that he's doing here. He says, no one would have gotten this kind of insane, arbitrary sentence that I got. But some of the crimes he committed carry mandatory minimums. The aggravated identity theft is a part of what actually made the sentence what it was. If you didn't do that particular crime, you would not have faced that specific amount of time.
A treatment that no one else would have gotten, 41 days in isolation in the SHU. And to add insult to injury, I had two co-defendants, one who got probation, one who was me, who got 7 years, and the other one who's still in the same facility today, suffering the same thing. Sam Mealy is still sitting in there, which I still think it's a great injustice.
Now, I can agree with George Santos on that front. I can totally agree with him that it is a great injustice that he's walking free and one of his co-conspirators they're still in prison. You know what I mean? I think he's like, hey, this is so arbitrary and no one would have gotten these times. And maybe that's true. Maybe they were making an example out of George Santos. I can't say. What I can say is, did you or did you not commit the crime, my guy?
All non-violent first-time offenders with no criminal background. And we're being thrown in this harsh environment with absolutely nothing. So when I spoke to President Trump yesterday, I told him my commitment would be to prison reform. I told him my commitment would be to fighting to help Sam Mealy and so many other people who are being absolutely drowned with this arbitrary sentencing style of judges who are trying to circumvent the First Step Act.
Maybe one of the silver linings in all of this stuff is that, Trump pardons or grants clemency to people, and then they come out of prison and they're like, whoa, prison in America sucks. That's crazy. Wait, we've been doing this to people? Wait, hold on. People have to like spend the entirety of their lives in there? It's just like a revolving door of folks who just like constantly go through this system and are experiencing quite literally the worst conditions imaginable sometimes. That's crazy. We've got to reform this. Like, if there's any silver lining in the fact that Trump will grant clemency or pardon people, and kind of I think one of the conditions of doing that is that you got to come out and talk about it. If there's anything that you can say that might be good here, it's that folks come out and they more or less decry the terrible conditions of the American carceral prison system. But lest we forget, George Santos pleaded guilty to wire fraud and identity theft. He did the crimes. He said he did the crimes. And if he wasn't a famous ally of Donald Trump, a media darling, for one reason, for better or for worse, if he wasn't that, he'd still be doing the time. How do I know? How do you know that? Well, Trump said so himself in a Truth Social post. Trump more or less said the quiet part out loud. I want to read it to you. On Truth Social, Donald Trump posted this. He said, George Santos was somewhat of a rogue. Somewhat, huh? But there are many rogues throughout our country, perhaps including you, Mr. President. All this stuff, he goes on for a bit. He says that the sentence was severe, to be sent to prison for 7 years, and he thought that was excessive. Okay, fine. The part that I really want to point out to you, he says this: at least Santos had the courage, conviction, and intelligence to always vote Republican. If a TV writer wrote this into a script and gave it to the network head and said, this is what I want to make, I think they'd be like, hey guys, this is just a little on the nose. It's just a little too much. Can we tone it down a little bit? Let's make it more realistic. George Santos admitted to lying to Congress, stealing from campaign donors, using funds for personal use. In fact, the House Ethics Committee documented some of that personal usage. Botox sessions flagged on campaign debit cards. Brother, get it together. Designer items, Hermes, come on, Sephora, face, beat to the gods. And perhaps the funniest ones, smaller purchases on OnlyFans. A gooner. Okay, Hakeem Jeffries wasn't happy about Trump granting clemency to a person he helped to expel from Congress. He had this to say where he really turned things back to the point. He kind of like took this moment. Yes, George Santos is crazy and certainly kind of like red meat for the media. We love to talk about him. But Hakeem Jeffries kept the main thing. Watch this.
That's the reality. Now, listen, there have been votes on the Affordable Care Act tax credits in both the House and the Senate throughout the year. And Republicans have repeatedly voted against extending those tax credits because they care more about George Santos and freeing him than they do about providing health care to everyday Americans. That's the unfortunate reality that we confront.
Listen, he has a point. We are in the third longest government shutdown in U.S. history, and Trump is prioritizing this, his political allies, the people who scratch that egotistical itch. I think I'm going to call it there. Tell me what you think. I'm Garrison Hayes, guest hosting here for Jesse Dollemore. Make sure you like this video and you subscribe to this channel. This is a great channel, and if you aren't already subscribed, you should subscribe. And then come over and subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it if you did. I'm getting really close to a milestone, and you could maybe help me cross it. I think you'll like what I'm doing over there, especially if you like what I'm doing over here. Love to know what you think down in the comments. Be sure to follow Jesse on all platforms at Dollemore on Blue Sky and Twitter and Threads and Instagram and TikTok and everywhere else. He's everywhere at Dollemore. Follow him there. And you can find links to my social media platforms on my channel as well. So make sure you click that link. Come on over, check me out. As always, appreciate you being here. Until next time, peace.